Okay, so if you're watching this, there's a good chance you just got through watching James McQuiggan's interview over on the Simply Cyber, Simply Secured podcast with me. And I just kind of wanted to go into some more detail about a few things. One, James did ask me if I were to have a sandwich, like what would the sandwich be? And I think it was a toss up between a Reuben and a Cuban. And I put a lot of thought into this that they could be combined together somehow. That'll be a project for later, but I've thought that one out. Anyway, I wanted to discuss this project that I call the Drone Renaissance. So I call this the Drone Renaissance because, like the original Renaissance, it marks a period of rapid decentralized innovation driven by catalyst technologies such as 3D printing, open source programming, internet. So in the 15th century, the ideas that we would know as the Renaissance, they spread outward from Italy, not just because of artists or thinkers or merchants or anything, but because of infrastructure, technology, specifically Gutenberg's printing press. That tool enabled fast, wide transmission of disruptive ideas, which were then adapted to local context. Over time, the Renaissance wasn't a single movement. It fractured into national and regional forms, each shaped by the culture, terrain, and need. So we're seeing the same thing now with drones. The catalytic technology is no longer the printing press here. It's 3D printers, cheap sensors, open hardware, global supply chains, global communications infrastructure, ideas and designs propagated instantly through forums, GitHub repos, YouTube channels, Telegram groups. Every garage and basement can become a lab, and every war zone becomes a test site that skips research and development cycles. If a tool or technique is physically possible, solves a real problem, and doesn't require magic, it's already being built. Maybe in a lab, maybe in a garage, maybe in a Connex in Ukraine. And just like the Renaissance, what started as a singular wave of innovation is fragmenting into regional, functional, and ideological movements and adaptations. So, platforms in Ukraine, cartel drones in Mexico. Look up how many cartel drones have reached U.S. airspace in the past 3 or 4 years. You have police drones that are used for riot control, firefighting. I've even seen drones being used for like building level 3D printing. And then we get the ones that I find of interest, which is perch and stare drones, which do what their name is. They sit there and watch. So this isn't a fad or a moment as much as it is a paradigm shift, in my opinion. It's decentralized. New actors adopt drone tech, not because it's trendy, but because it solves a real asymmetry in conflict. This drone renaissance, like the humanist renaissance, isn't centrally directed. It's emergent, distributed, and adaptive. And just like then, the real change isn't the tools themselves, it's the shift in orientation. From passive defense to active exploration, doctrine, modular improvisation, and from centralized authority to open source autonomy in the development of these things. These used to be the sole property of the nation state. And now you've got part-time cyclops building them in their spare bedroom. That's why I call it the drone renaissance. The limiting factor isn't necessarily technology, it's imagination. For a while, drones were just toys, maybe tools for commercial enterprise. That's commercial ones. Before that, it was military. So I'm not asking, do these certain things exist? Like, I assume they already do. Because if I can conceive it and it fits in the parameters of feasibility, utility, and use case, then someone else with more resources and fewer constraints has already prototyped it. So back in college, I wrote a paper asking why we don't have a crystal ball to predict the future. Well, the answer is simple. That would be magic. It breaks physics. That paper wasn't well received. Anyways, a probability engine that consumes real world signals, models future trajectories, and outputs likely outcomes, that's not magic. That's math. That's a forecasting system. And if it's physically possible and tactically useful, then somewhere someone is building it. That's the lens I use when I think about stuff like drones and what their applications can be. I've found the last few years to be particularly exciting. And none of this stuff that I'm working on, I've necessarily come up with myself. Like, we don't need to wait for white papers or government contracts or big news from Boeing. Someone's already written it or thought about it, and it just needs to be read. Hell, I'm going to link a couple of white papers in the description below. Anyways, like I said, I assume someone is already doing it. And I ask what happens when that capability becomes cheap, disposable, and fieldable, when it fits into a decision matrix and cost-benefit analysis where this would become more common, as opposed to, say, someone in a car in your parking lot with a laptop trying to crack into your Wi-Fi or doing a physical penetration test or traditional hacking means. So we're not up against impossibility in discussing these. We're up against delayed imagination. This is my belief that security failures almost never start with a lack of tools. They start with bad orientation. And when it comes to like these types of drones, I think it's an underappreciated risk that is closer in the rearview mirror than not. So most offenders start with assumptions. This kind of attack wouldn't happen here. Nobody would do that. This isn't in the threat matrix. Maybe not your security people, but definitely some of the people in decision making. Very reactive. So this belief, in my opinion, becomes a filter, and that filter blinds them to anything outside their mental model. Attackers don't care about assumptions, only as far as that they know you have them and can exploit them. They don't care what you think is likely. They care about what works for them, or rather what could work for them in their decision matrix. These are biases like confirmation bias, normalcy bias, survivorship bias. They aren't abstract. A lot of us already know what these are. But they're not psychologically trivial in organizational or human behavior. They are potential operation failures that prevent us from seeing edge threats until they become a problem. So every breach pretty much has two phases. The thing happened, the thing was responded to, and then there's the PR, media cycle, the credit monitoring. And a lot of people will try to say, we didn't think that would happen. We thought it was secure, or we didn't know that that could happen. What that says to me is we didn't update our mental model. So I'm building from the idea that what's physically possible, what's technically feasible, there's a motive somewhere for someone. Who has motive? Who would do this? Who could do this? So this gets into OODA loop stuff. I'm sure you all know about that. So most people think the OODA loop is about speed. It's not. It's about quality of orientation, how well your internal model reflects the real world. When you assume something isn't a threat instead of observing and weighing options, you're not orienting, you're kind of hallucinating. People and organizations fall back in bias or tradition, and their orientation calcifies. And a large bureaucratic orientation is predictable. It's exploitable. So I've mentioned John Robb and a few other videos to talk about Boyd. In open source warfare, it's not just about observation. It's about reorientation and speed. Super empowered individuals, last video, adapt faster than institutions because you don't need consensus or permission. They act on entropy while the defenders are still stuck in the process. So if we want to understand the modern threat surface, we need to stop asking what's likely and start asking what's possible, because we're in a really weird time period right now. And we need to ask how soon that possible can be weaponized. Like, some people have said drones don't have enough energy to loiter long enough to be useful. Well, that's kind of in the box thinking. A drone isn't hovering, it's landing and perching, and the payload on it is going about its mission. Once it lands, battery life becomes a function of trickle charge and sleep cycles, not flight time. This setup right here is a Kali Pi headless and a Hack RF1. You can kind of figure out what you can do with that. And if you run that up to a solar charger and figure out the timing and power loads, that thing can loiter for weeks potentially. So I'm not talking about a little toy DJI. I'm talking about a flying Kali Pi with an LTE hat hooked up to an RF SDR. And yeah, that might be niche. So is a guy in a car more dangerous? Possibly. He could be sitting in your parking lot with his laptop out. But the one thing I want to say is if your physical security is good, someone's going to notice there's a weird guy in a car nearby. It's more visible, more traceable, and more limited in access, but it doesn't require as much resources. A car attacker might have better tools, but he's exposed. This drone takes the person and a lot of potential risk out of the picture. And we can get into talking about camouflaging and all this other stuff. People don't check roofs. I know this. And to the point that maybe the laptop in the car with the guy sitting in your organization's parking lot, maybe it has more tools. This is running a Kali instance. It's going to have a lot of the same basic tools. I don't know, Nmap, Wireshark, Aircrack, Metasploit, like all that can be run off of a Pi. And where this has an LTE hat, it doesn't necessarily even need to hijack the Wi-Fi or anything to get out. And it can be used for a lot of stuff. Imagination and physics are the limit. You can have automated payloads, GPS dongles, scriptable triggers. But anyways, attacks don't need an entire toolbox. You need someone with some creativity, proximity, a weak spot in the armor, and a pivot point. So we got recon, pivot point, and proximity. That's 3 of the big issues right there. It's compact, silent, replaceable, fieldable. The only difference is that you're not sitting next to it. And then some might say that if a drone is a threat, your network already sucks, which is kind of backwards thinking. The drone extends the attack surface to include BYOD, guest signals. There's that whole Wi-Fi thing that APT-28 did a while back. So them launching a drone in the States, that there's kind of out there in my opinion. But you've got like Bluetooth bleeding. You've got IoT devices, guest networks, and this could theoretically let someone just sit there and poke around at things for an extended period of time. And any data that would be collected, which at the very least you're going to collect the information of like what Wi-Fi is in the area and a lot of other stuff with the PAC-RF1. You don't even really need to do anything elaborate. It's just persistence. And eventually, someone on the other end doesn't even have to be the drone pilot, whoever's operating it, operating the high, all they have to do is just poke around long enough to find something, and they probably will. And there's the whole thing, drones are obvious. Oh, you're underestimating how visible are. This, not to be a dick, but that's assuming that you're flying like a hobbyist and being kind of brazen about it. So if I were to do this, I would move it low and slow after dark. I would perch it in a cluttered architectural area. I don't know, rooftop vents, somewhere where no one's going to look at it right away because people don't look up. I wouldn't have any lights on it. And with quadcopters, especially, they're not really aerodynamic to begin with. You can dress them up however you want to and slap some solar panels on it, and it looks like something that's supposed to be there. And it's not going to be airborne for long. It moves with a purpose, lands, and no one saw it. This isn't about a wow factor. It's to provide it's to provide an alternative to other physical attacks when the cost benefit favors the drone. Like when physical access is denied, say they've got closed parking, like they've got decent-ish security, vertical space, lots of vertical space and overhangs. I drove by a power plant the other night, and I could still see tons of cracks and crevices in the piping in the dark. Just fly something in there and just wait. And we could get into forensics also. Drone forensics is kind of tricky from what I've read. There's not a lot that can be pulled off there, especially if the pie on there is set up for encryption or anything. I don't know. Someone more creative than me can come up with that. I'm sure they're doing that or already have. And a lot of this requires like DIY, which no two DIY projects are going to be the same. And if it's disguised as infrastructure on, say, an industrial building. Plenty of things run on solar power. Plenty of cameras and commercial lots run on solar power. Yeah, it's going to get overlooked. Even if it's recovered, like I said, forensics will hit a wall. They don't have the capability or analysts on staff who could figure out what it was doing. And one thing I want to talk about is this right here over on Drone XL, a Russian solar-powered ambush drone. So there's a few points in here. These are mostly just for sitting and watching. They're not really rigged up to do any kind of cyber stuff, but where there is a will, there is a way. So the solar panels are cheap. These drones are disposable. It could run on a solar trickle charge, hop as far as power can allow it, and roost until it trickles back up. And when it does, it can move. This could feasibly be automated, and it could just keep hopping to its destination. Put it in a false casing, and it looks like junk. This thing here, if you're in a hurry, you are going to think it's just a solar panel. Or a heap of trash in the case of this one. And there's also the idea that it needs to loiter for a long time to cause problems. One of these could land and just start, especially if there's like pre-reconnaissance, they could start as soon as they get there. Think of it like a flying Wi-Fi pineapple, which happened, I believe, in 2018 outside of a commercial building in New York City. They changed the signal from 2 DJI drones to a Wi-Fi pineapple and had it hovering outside of some guy's like 30th floor window. They were caught, obviously. So the question becomes not how far it can fly, but can it complete its objective within an impact window? Like, what's the timetable? There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. Endurance. Is endurance more necessary than the actual cyber attack? Like, are you in a hurry? So, and these are modular too. Mission dictates payload. Do you need it to loiter? Do you need detectability? What's the launch method? Terrain compatibility? Weather is a big one. After driving by that power plant, I got an idea, which who knows if it would work. Maybe I'll test something out, get the 3D printer fired up, get CAD going, and make something that has like little magnetic legs or something for bracing. Put 4 little solar panels on a quadcopter, some small camera, and just see if I can't get it to stick to a wall. So, kind of to reiterate a point, it's a lot of the stuff we see about drones might be hype for now, but when cost benefit favors using the drones, I think we'll see them more as opposed to other things. A other thing is just to touch back on that point. If your systems are weak to a drone attack, then your security sucks. Most organizations, like I would say a lot of them, their security sucks, especially smaller and more mid-sized businesses. It's why we have jobs. Well, did until some of us got laid off. A lot of people don't really understand radio frequency, radio propagation. Everything puts out a radio signal just about these days, even if it's not Wi-Fi. And that can also be picked up with that PAC RF1. And IoT super insecure. And a lot of people are just overconfidence and nothing has happened to us yet. So we're going to keep on hoping and praying that nothing does. And security is implemented by humans, and humans under pressure inside of complex organizations, we make mistakes. So I wouldn't assume that there is no threat from drone-based cyber attack. That's why I'm doing this project, because if I can do it, then if Ivan and Orlov in the trenches of eastern Ukraine can throw these things together with 3D printers and a Connex and a trench line while dodging drones and artillery fire, and I can do this in my spare bedroom, I'm sure someone who has a lot more malicious intent than me can come up with something. But that's my project, and I'll get into some more stuff about it in other videos that should be coming up. One thing I did change that was mentioned in the interview with James, I was using the Flytory Stallion VTOL. I have since decided to go with the Titan Dynamics Titan Avenger VTOL, just because the printing's a bit more sturdy and it's going to crash. That's the entire thing with DIY drones and stuff. Like I'm not going to get married to this thing. Like I know eventually there's going to be a failure and it will go down. Bit more sturdy print, printed it in ASA Aero, and I lost my words, my train of thought. But yeah, that's the new platform I'll be using. It also has a higher takeoff weight, so I should be able to fit a bit more in or get a bit more range when I do the experiments with it. But that was the only other change. Anyways, I appreciate you watching. I'll see you later. If you like this kind of content, I would greatly appreciate if you check out my other videos and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Leave a like and subscribe. Thank you.